What does it truly feel like when a person is so consumed by guilt that they cannot forgive themselves? He snatched the officer's service pistol and without hesitation pointed it at himself. Because just the night before, he had accidentally caused the death of his 3 children in a fire. 2 police officers took the statement from this murderer with looks of sympathy on their faces. The man sitting opposite them, head bowed and eyes red, detailed the events of that tragic night. He had been partying with friends at home until late. The noise kept the children awake, and his wife, unable to bear it, eventually asked the guests to leave. But after sending his friends off, the man was still immersed in that lingering joy. He finished the remaining alcohol alone, but still felt unsatisfied. So he added a few logs to the fireplace and hurriedly went out to a nearby supermarket to buy more beer. On the way, he wasn't sure if he had put the fire screen back, but he took a chance, thinking nothing would happen. But when he returned, a raging fire had already engulfed his home. His wife was desperately trying to rush into the sea of fire to save the children, but was forcibly held back by firefighters. He stood there like a passing stranger, staring blankly, unable to believe what was happening before his eyes. The fire wasn't extinguished until dawn. Firefighters carried out 2 black bags from the ruins. Those were his 2 beloved daughters, and his youngest son had been completely consumed by the flames, leaving no remains. His wife cried her heart out, overwhelmed with grief, until she fainted from lack of oxygen and was rushed away by an ambulance. After Lee finished recounting the events, he fell into silence, quietly waiting for the judgment of the law. But after recording everything, the police prepared to let him go. The despairing Lee was taken aback. He had committed an unforgivable wrongdoing, so why wasn't he receiving the punishment he believed he deserved? However, in the eyes of the police, this was nothing more than an accident.
A million other people did last night. I'm not gonna crucify you. It's not a crime to forget to put the screen on the fire.
Soon, the police finished questioning Lee and thoughtfully arranged a car to take him back. However, this care only made him feel more pain and torment. He couldn't understand their kindness at all. He only felt that he deserved to die and should receive his due punishment right then and there. So, when a police officer passed by him, he seized the opportunity to snatch the officer's gun, wanting to end this life burdened with sin. But the safety wasn't on. While he fumbled frantically to disengage it, the police swarmed him and stopped him. Although the bullet didn't fire, his heart had already died. That fire not only burned down his home, but also incinerated his marriage. We always think time will wash away all pain, but some memories are like the winter in Manchester, never to be melted by spring. Several years slipped away silently like sand through fingers, and life seemed to return to calm. Lee cut off all social contact, left Manchester with his unhealed wounds, and settled in a windowless basement in Boston. Now he relies on handling the trivial, messy chores of 4 residential buildings to maintain a basic livelihood. For a long time, Lee worked without complaint, yet his efforts rarely received recognition or praise from the tenants because his face always wore a cold expression. He had long lost his passion for life and his soul, living exactly like a walking zombie. Some people even privately complained that he looked like he was visiting a grave while at work, but who could truly understand his suffering and torment? That fire burned his heart, along with his home. Now only unhealable wounds and insoluble knots remain. Even when a pretty girl tried to flirt with him, he turned a blind eye. When 2 men whispered in front of him, Lee assumed they were discussing him and walked straight up to start a fight. Every time night fell, he returned to that sunless basement, sitting blankly on the sofa, listening to the sound of the TV, lost in thought until he fell into a heavy sleep. It was hard to tell if such days were indifference born of numbness or an abnormality born of despair. He gradually got used to this dark life, as if waiting for time to slowly dismantle him, until one day a phone call broke the dead silence of his life. On the other end was an operator from Manchester Central Hospital in his hometown, informing Lee that his brother Joe had suffered a sudden heart attack and his life was hanging by a thread. Lee put down his work and sped through countless roads and bridges, finally arriving at the hospital where his brother was. But he was one step too late. He didn't make it to see his brother one last time. But Lee didn't cry out in grief or panic. Instead, he remained eerily calm, almost indifferent, because he had long grown used to covering his pain with numbness. After kissing his brother's body goodbye, he left the hospital with mixed feelings, preparing to pick up his nephew, Patrick, who didn't yet know the news. But at the school ice hockey rink, the usually normal Patrick suddenly slammed violently into an opponent, and soon the two were grappling with each other. Seeing this, the coach rushed forward to stop it, but Patrick cursed at him. All this abnormal behavior was entirely because Patrick saw his uncle Lee appear. Past experience hinted to him that this usually meant something had happened to his father again. The inner fear and anxiety quietly erupted, making him unable to control his emotions. But after hearing the news of his father's death from his uncle, he appeared extremely calm. Perhaps for many people experiencing the death of a close relative for the first time, death is not yet concrete. So, after arriving at the morgue, Patrick just glanced hurriedly at his father lying there, then turned and left. This might be an instinct to escape, or perhaps grief needs a little time to truly reach the heart. When the night swallowed the last ray of daylight, the whole world fell into a silence as deep as the sea. When Patrick opened the refrigerator door, he accidentally let some frozen chicken slide out. He tried to pick it up and put it back, but the sudden surge of grief made his fingers tremble uncontrollably. He couldn't close the refrigerator door no matter what, because the cold, frozen chicken reminded him of his father he had glimpsed in the freezer earlier that day. That once warm and familiar figure now could only exist in his memory in such a way. At that moment, sadness arrived at the depths of his heart like a bursting flood, completely drowning his reason. Once again, he couldn't control his emotions and burst into tears until Lee heard the sound and came to comfort him. Deep inside each of us, there are some extremely subtle emotional triggers hidden quietly. Sometimes it's just because of trivial things, like a refrigerator door that won't close, stubbing a toe on a table leg, hearing a familiar lyric, seeing someone hand a child a candy, or being unable to find something when leaving the house. These seemingly insignificant moments can stir up waves in our hearts, making us unable to stop our tears at some caught-off-guard moment. Perhaps in the eyes of outsiders, these small things are not worth mentioning. They might think we are making a fuss over nothing. However, only we know best in our hearts what kind of unforgettable emotions and stories are hidden behind these sudden tears. It might be an unforgettable memory, an unspoken regret, or a longing that penetrates the bone. After his mood calmed down a bit, Patrick invited a few friends to the house. The space, originally as silent as stagnant water, was instantly filled with laughter and joy. Lee took on the responsibility of an adult and ordered pizza for them, while he chose to stay alone in the corner, silently gnawing on bread. After eating, he returned to his room, using loneliness and pain to isolate himself from the lively world outside. A few hours later, Patrick stood outside the door and asked him in a hesitant tone if his girlfriend could stay the night. Patrick's sudden question stunned Lee for a moment. His eyes were dull, and he couldn't help but fall silent for a moment before giving an answer in a nearly numb voice. He had no objection. What objection could he have? He was just a father who had lost his children, a younger brother who had just lost his brother, and a failure in a broken marriage. Fate had pushed him into the abyss and manipulated his life haphazardly. He was just a lost lamb. What right did he have to influence others' choices? So he just let everything around him change naturally. Now, inside his cold shell, there were only unhealable wounds and insoluble knots. After a loved one passes away, we often have no time to truly sit with our grief before we're forced to deal with all the trivial matters they left behind in this world. The next day, the lawyer conveyed Joe's last wish to Lee. He had transferred all his assets to Lee's name and designated Lee as Patrick's legal guardian. What surprised Lee even more was that Joe had specifically left a sum for moving expenses, hoping Lee would leave Boston and move back to Manchester to pick up his old life. Lee was deeply confused by this. He didn't understand why his brother would make such a choice. How could a person who couldn't even take care of himself support another person's life? But life never allows us to escape. Accepting parting and shouldering responsibility is the inevitable path. After much hesitation, Lee helplessly assumed the responsibility of looking after Patrick. Joe's estate included a boat, but for Lee, the boat was useless. Moreover, the boat's engine had fallen into disrepair, and starting it again would cost a considerable amount of money. Therefore, Lee planned to ask his brother's old friend, George, to help sell it. After all, once Patrick finished this semester, they would move to Boston to live, and leaving the boat here would only be a waste. But Patrick resolutely opposed it because that boat carried memories of him and his father. Seeing that Lee and Patrick couldn't reach an agreement, George suggested that he could look after the boat, and if the child wanted to come back on weekends, he could stay at his house temporarily. Hearing this, Lee instantly caught a glimmer of hope and eagerly asked George if he would be willing to adopt Patrick. But unfortunately, George already had children of his own, and he couldn't take on the responsibility of caring for another child. However, Patrick was also very resistant to going to Boston to live. He really couldn't understand. When they had a house here, why go to that sunless basement? Moreover, he had his good friends here, the band he loved, and his girlfriend to accompany him. However, Manchester's winter was gloomy and cold. The severe cold made the ground as hard as iron. Joe's body had to helplessly wait for spring to arrive before it could be buried. During this time, he could only lie quietly in the freezer, isolated from the mortal world. For this reason, Lee had to return to Boston to pack his bags, preparing to stay with Patrick in Manchester for a while longer. He threw everything randomly into the suitcase, except for the photos of his 3 children, which he felt he had nowhere to place. The bottomless guilt, the scars frozen in time, the despair of communication, and the pathetic existence of stumbling forward in the ruins refused to let him go. He had thought that perhaps forgetting would stop the pain, but time didn't seem to intend to grant him the right to forget. At dinner, Patrick accidentally glanced at his uncle's injured hand. The wrapped bandages and seeping blood seemed to silently tell of his pain. Patrick's heart felt like it was gently pinched by an invisible hand, and an inexplicable resonance quietly surged from the bottom of his heart. At this moment, he seemed to be able to see through this shocking wound into the pain and struggle deep in his uncle's heart. He began to understand why his uncle got injured, and deeply realized that in this world, he was never the only one suffering. On the day of his father's funeral, young Patrick shouldered the responsibility alone, calmly hosting every guest who came to mourn. Every movement he made, every look in his eyes, revealed a maturity and steadiness far beyond his years. He seemed to have quietly transformed overnight from an immature big boy into a man who could hold up the sky. At that moment, he was the only pillar of the family. In contrast, Lee on the side seemed a bit at a loss. He stood silently in the corner, his eyes wandering, without much expression on his face, passively responding to the friends and relatives who came to mourn throughout the process. What broke this silent atmosphere was the arrival of his ex-wife Randy and her current husband. Having not seen each other for a long time, Randy came over to hug Lee to offer comfort, but Lee's expression remained cold, while Randy couldn't stop her tears. After the funeral, Patrick wanted to take the boat out to sea again with his father's memory, but he couldn't afford the price of an engine at all. But this time, Lee seemed to have thought of a way. Later, he took Patrick to the basement and showed him the guns in the collection cabinet. Soon, that fishing boat full of memories had a brand new heart. Patrick took his girlfriend to enjoy this rare happiness, but as soon as she took the helm, the boat veered off course. Watching the cheerful backs of the 2 young people, Lee felt the warmth of family affection he hadn't felt for a long time, and a shallow smile unconsciously rippled at the corner of his mouth. On the way back, he wanted to create an opportunity for them to be alone, so he made up a random excuse to go out for a walk. However, just around a corner, he met Randy again. She was walking with a friend. Seeing Lee, Randy subconsciously showed him her newborn son. An inexplicable panic surged in Lee's heart, but he forced himself to pretend to be calm and respond politely. His words revealed an unspeakable alienation, wanting to escape this suffocating space. But Randy really wanted to talk to him.
You could see him if you want.
Could we ever have lunch?
You and us, you and me?
Yeah. I said a lot of terrible things to you.
No.
But I know you never... Maybe you don't want to talk to me.
It's not that.
Let me finish. However, my heart was broken. It's always gonna be broken. But I know yours is broken too. But I don't have to carry. I said things that I should burn in hell for what I said to you.
No,
It was just...
No, Randy, no.
I'm just sorry.
I can't.
I love you. And I just want to tell you.
I would want to talk to you, Randy.
Lee.
Please,
Lee,
I'm
you
trying
gotta... I don't know what...
No,
I don't want to torture you.
You're not torturing me.
I just want to tell you that I was wrong.
No. You understand? There's nothing there. There's nothing there.
That's not true. That's not true.
I'm serious. You don't understand. And I don't know what this... I know you understand. I've got to go. I'm sorry.
In the moment of impending emotional collapse, Lee finally fled that suffocating scene and turned into a bar, trying to anesthetize himself with alcohol to forget the inner pain. But just as he was about to leave, he bumped into another customer. It was an extremely ordinary small matter, but catalyzed by alcohol, he deliberately picked a fight and clashed with the man. But the opponents were many, and Lee was soon pinned in the corner. Perhaps getting beaten was also a form of release. Fortunately, George arrived in time to rescue Lee and took him back to his home to treat his wounds. There, he finally cried out loud, but he couldn't say why he was crying. It seemed to be the inexplicable loss surging in his heart after seeing his wife start a new life, or the eternal pain of fatherhood being torn apart after remembering those 3 poor children, or the waves in his heart stirred up by his brother's death. That belated cry was just a speechless choke of emotional explosion, a silent scream of inner pain. At this moment, he was no longer that man pretending to be strong, just a lonely soul who had lost his direction and was floating in the ocean of sorrow. After returning home, Lee tried to heat up some pasta sauce to satisfy his hunger. However, physical exhaustion and alcohol paralysis made his mind trance-like, and he slowly fell into a deep sleep. Soon, the room was filled with a burnt smell. In this confused state, Lee seemed to see his 2 daughters, who had been buried in the sea of fire. Suddenly, an alarm woke him from his sleep. Finding the room filled with pungent, thick smoke, he ran to the kitchen in panic to turn off the gas stove. Fortunately, it was discovered in time and did not cause irreparable fault. But this also aroused his panic again. He was afraid that the tragedy of the fire would repeat itself, afraid that Patrick would also die at his hands. Therefore, he made up his mind to find a suitable guardian for Patrick. So, he went to George's house again and seriously discussed the matter with the couple. He confessed that he was truly powerless. He couldn't even take care of himself, so how could he take care of others, let alone a growing child? He sincerely hoped that George could become Patrick's guardian. One night, Lee told Patrick that he would be leaving Manchester soon, and Patrick didn't have to go with him because George had agreed to be his guardian. In addition, all of Joe's inheritance would soon be transferred to George's name. When he became an adult, the house and the fishing boat, whether he wanted to rent them out or sell them, would be decided by himself. After listening to Lee's words, Patrick did not resist, only letting out a suppressed sigh as his Adam's apple bobbed. In the blink of an eye, winter went and spring came. The frozen soil began to melt, and Joe's body could finally be buried in peace. In this spring, he was able to embrace the earth and sleep in the quiet cemetery from then on, and Lee's life had to continue. He embarked on the journey to Boston again. That apartment was indeed small, but it allowed him to have fewer nightmares at night, not always hearing children calling for "Daddy." Fixing pipes and unclogging sewers was tiring work, but at least it left his brain no time to think about those painful days. He knew this wasn't really escaping, but he also clearly understood that he had ultimately failed to reconcile with the pain of the past. Some say time is a medicine that heals everything, that it washes over the scars in the heart like warm water over a beach, slowly fading them. But this medicine is clearly coated with a layer of illusory sugar, making people lie to themselves in their escape that it will get better if they wait a little longer, hoping it can wash away all painful memories like washing away ink stains. But how can true pain be washed away? It is like a tattoo, carved into the marrow, stitch by stitch, with a red-hot needle. Even if time wears the skin white, those marks remain clear, carrying its weight with every breath, never to be erased. When we struggle until we are exhausted, we see clearly that what time gifts us is merely fleeting self-comfort, like a little warmth gathered in the palm on a winter night, dispersing as soon as the wind blows. Those memories we try our best to forget are stubborn stones stuck in the bottom of our hearts, their roots entangled with our veins, remaining motionless no matter how we try to pull them out. It is already spring, but the sea breeze in Manchester is still cold. It is like a sharp blade, constantly cutting open those wounds that have been repeatedly stitched and torn apart. Although countless people tell me that forgetting to turn off the fireplace is not an unforgivable sin, I can never let it go because I tried to struggle. But even if I struggled desperately, in the end, I could only let that pain drag me into the darkness of eternal night from time to time, then drag me into the bottomless abyss, spitting out thousands of blades to slice me into pieces, and then stitch the pieces back together before dawn, just to let me experience that never-ending, lingering death again. I think in this world, not everyone can easily reconcile with themselves, nor does everyone have to reconcile. We inherently have the right not to let go of our pain.